I would like to welcome you all to this 8th webinar of Facets of Health Humanities, hosted by Pietrisco, and to thank you for spending your Wednesday evening with us. So after having focused our attention on narrative prose, autobiography, poetry, cinema, theater, and graphic novels, in this webinar, we will focus our attention on children's literature. And in this journey in the world of children's literature and health humanities, we will be led by Elzaemira Festa and Manuela Salvi, who are both well-known Italian writers of children's literature. In this webinar, Elzaemira Festa and Manuela Salvi, we talk about their experience of writing and relating to diversity and inclusion, and in particular about their fictional representation of disability, illness, and mental health. They will not only explore the representation of disability, but also the misrepresentation of disability, thus allowing us to consider and to see children's literature potential to reflect societal attitudes. So a few introductory words before handing over to Manuela and Elzaemira, and hints, suggestions, ideas to warm up our minds before the talk. So the first point on which I would like to focus my attention and your attention is the connection between disability studies and children's literature. And it is important to consider that in the past, and also quite recent past, it has been quite unusual to find discussions of disability issues and the impact of disability images in the analysis of children's literature in comparison to analysis of race and of gender bias. And this absence seemed to deny the power of this fictional description to create societal attitudes to disability and to ignore their importance among those who have personal or close experience of disability. What is more, it ignored the needs of huge numbers of young readers whose ideas were formed by misrepresentation, and many of whom would have to, in a way, renegotiate their misunderstandings of the nature of disability at a later date in order to successfully manage disability, whether their own disability or others' disability, in private and in public life. And the second point in which we could focus our attention is that this lack of scholarly consideration in both disability studies and children's literature stopped each field being better informed by the other. And a significant example of this dissociation is to be found in the disability entry in the Cambridge Guide to Children's Book in English, which was published in 2001, in which the authors, who are both important scholars in children's literature, presented an overview of novels titled, which included disabled characters, and their description of protagonists being imprisoned in their wheelchairs, wheelchair-bound and crippled, well highlights that the affirmative language preferred by disabled people and supported on a theoretical level by critics of disability studies had been completely ignored, and suggested that their analysis might not have been informed by contemporary ideas about disability. And the insight that disability scholars can instead bring to the analysis of children's literature lies in their understanding of disability not as a personalized, wholly biological characteristic, but as a social construction well highlighted in the text description of both disabled and non-disabled characters' attitudes, and in the rationale of plots which both create and consolidate the attitudes that are present in contemporary society. The most important effort at the intersection of children and disability studies has been, however, in progressing equity issues for disabled children in mainstream education rather than in the critical study of disability in children's material. material. So as said, hints, suggestions, ideas to warm up our minds before entering to the heart of our discussion. Suggestions and ideas that I would also ask my colleague Sidia Fiorato to put forward.
Thank you very much, Chiara, and I would like to join you in welcoming our audience tonight for our meeting on such a relevant topic that is particularly dear to us. I would like to start by quoting the critic Bishop, who underlines how children's books represent windows onto reality. So we may add, once you approach such windows, they can offer you new perspectives on the world. Moreover, books are places where children may meet people unlike themselves, maybe the first place where they can have this opportunity. Hence, their value for the development of the children's view on the world and society, so their educational value. As Chiara said, representations of disability in children's books have improved in the past decade, but stereotypes persist. People with disabilities are presented as more different from than similar to persons without disabilities. And the consequences of such beliefs results in segregation and isolation. Actually, if we shift the perspective and we engage with the perspective of the readers, when children cannot find themselves reflected in the books they read, or when the images they see are distorted, negative, or laughable, they learn about how they are devalued in a society of which, however, they are a part. So the texts themselves have the potential for creating a change in attitudes about disability to understand that a disability is not fixed and dichotomous, but rather it is fluid and continuous. And I give the floor back to Chiara.
A few technical details before leaving the floor to our guests. First of all, this lecture, as the previous one, will be recorded and then it will be available on YouTube. So if you don't want to appear on the screen, please turn your camera off. And I also kindly ask you to mute your microphone so that there is no interference. Then there will be time for questions after the lecture. So you can either raise your virtual hand so that we can see that you want to ask a question, or alternatively, you can send a question through the chat. Third, some of the participants have asked if they can have a certificate of attendance, and yes, you can have it. You just need to request it through the Pietrisco PROSE. Then, last but not least, today's meeting will end for technical reasons at 7:15, 8:15, depending on the time zone. So it will last 1 hour and a quarter. Last but not least, our next lecture, Visual Culture and the Health Humanities, offered by Silvia Casini, and it will be on the 26th of January the next year. Now, without any further delay, Sidia and I will introduce our speaker, Elzaemira Festa. Elzaemira Festa is a journalist and writer with a great passion for children's literature. She graduated in classical literature at the University of Naples, Italy, then attended a master's degree in radio and television journalism in Perugia. Today, she lives and works in Rome. She's a reporter for TG3, an Italian TV channel, where she covers, among other things, school and children's issues. She has written several short stories for children and in 2010, an adventure book for teenagers, Between Love and Mystery, published by Mondadori, entitled La Baia delle Ombre, republished in an updated version in 2021. And Manuela Salvi.
And Manuela Salvi is an Italian writer, and she has published over 20 titles, some translated in French, Spanish, and German for these countries' markets. After her young adult novel, Girl Detached, now titled Party Girl, was banned in Italy, it was published in the UK by Barrington Stoke and was longlisted for the Carnegie Medal in 2017. Manuela's research project on censorship in Western children's publishing has earned her the Jacqueline Wilson Scholarship for a PhD in creative writing at Roehampton University in London, which she completed in 2020. Moreover, she has founded the Italian Children's Writer Association. She works as a translator and copy editor and teaches creative writing.
Okay, so I'm sharing my screen and give definitely the floor to Manuela. Okay.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, this evening. I want, first of all, apologize for my English because it's a bit rusty, but I didn't want to write down my speech because I wanted this discussion to be like a conversation, so a little bit more warmer. And I hope that my many mistakes in English will encourage you to share your thoughts and ask questions without fear of I don't know, being embarrassed or something like that. So since we don't have much time, I would like just to dive into our focus. As you can see from our first slide, no, just the first one, thank you. Okay, so since I'm not an expert of disability or health issues in children's literature, what I want to do today is to give you a few tools to understand how diversity in general is represented in children's literature, but keeping in mind that disability is part of this environment about diversity. So as Chiara said earlier, of course, we have gender issues, race, religion, so a whole range of representations of diversity. So disability is a part of this environment. This is how I feel confident that these tools can be helpful to start a further study with a new approach on diversity. So the focus is, of course, understanding the representation of diversity in children's literature and how it may impact the representation of disability, illness, and mental health in particular. My aim is to make you see children's literature as a powerful tool in society to instruct young people and people in general about diversity and, of course, disability, illness, and mental health in particular. I want to say that my approach comes from Marxism, and particularly it focuses on ideology and cultural materialism, which are two theories from which you can explore literature and children's literature in particular. This is important to say because ideology is my main approach, since by exploring literature through ideology means basically to understand which kind of a society produced that literature. So the first thing when you ask yourself, when you question children's literature, is to give context to it, to understand the context, which means to historicize the cultural products, basically. So in this case, books. If you go to the second slide, thank you. So what is the current ideology? So if we lived, I don't know, maybe 50 years ago, we would say imperialism or Victorianism and so on. So ideology changes through time, and sometimes we are not aware of it. I think it would be difficult for us to say, okay, we are in this kind of ideology right now. We could say maybe capitalism, but capitalism is a very broad definition. So in literature, we say that in this specific period, we are in the middle of the liberal humanist ideology. What is this definition? Basically, the liberal humanist ideology says that this is the best of the possible worlds, and we don't need to question it. As an example, I can give you this. You should imagine to be aboard of a ship sailing the 7 seas. On the ship, there is a leak and there's water coming in. So the captain tells you to focus on the water. We must take the water and throw it back in the sea, because otherwise we are going to sink. So we are asked to focus on the water because we don't have to fix the leak, since the leak is part of the system, is part of the ship we are aboard. So basically, the liberal humanist ideology says that you can fix all these problems just by focusing on the problems themselves and not the leak that generates them. I don't know if it is clear, but if something is not clear, later you can ask questions about it. So basically, what the system asks in this context is, don't question the system, just fix the problems. Another example can be the fact that social class discrimination is never discussed. When we talk about diversity, is this aspect of discrimination is always excluded by any conversation. So the leak may be the social class discrimination. I don't have answers today, but just a lot of reflections about this topic. We have a context, which is liberal humanist ideology. This is the best of the possible words, and we don't need to question the system. We just need to focus on these small problems, very small problems. They all can be fixed. So don't worry about it, and keep having faith in this world, because it's the best. Trust the system. This is the main idea of this ideology. Next slide, please. Okay, but how does the liberal humanist ideology work in reality? Its main trait is the winner-loser manifesto. I call this the winner-loser manifesto because I think that we live in the performance society where we are encouraged to be winners all the time. So through this binary opposition, the liberal humanist ideology tells us basically that it's easy to understand who is a winner and who is a loser. Sorry, I think you skipped a slide. Sorry, that's why I was understanding. Sorry. Okay, this is the right one. Sorry. Okay, so a step back. The liberal humanist ideology is our ideology, and how does it work? Through please back again. Okay, this is it works through binary oppositions. What does it mean? It means that we are required to choose a position between two given options. So we are sure where's the bad side and the good side all the time. If you think about the current discussions in, I don't know, on social networks, on the media and so on, there are always two given options. There's never a third option, and there's never implied the possibility of start a discussion to explore different angles or different points of view. There's always right and wrong, bad and good. And these options are usually given. So we don't decide the sides, but we are required to choose a side all the time. And the interesting point of this kind of approach, of this kind of ideology, is that it's always implied what the good choice is. So basically, it's like there's no choice, basically, because if you are on the wrong side, you are going to be excluded, or you are going to be out of fashion, or maybe sometimes also racist or sexist or so on. This is very worrying because discussion is not encouraged, basically. So there are two given options. You have to choose, you must choose, and there's no discussion, a real discussion about things. In next slide now. In children's literature, this is no, this one. Okay.
This is okay. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I was confused because I was saying what's going on. Yeah. So I hope it's clear anyway. So so we have an ideology, which is the liberal humanist ideology, that works through the binary oppositions. So we have two sides and we must choose between two sides. No third option allowed. So in children's literature, this is translated into the winner, what I call the winner-loser manifesto. So the whole children's literature is based usually on a hero who has to win, basically. So if you don't win, you are not an hero. In order to win, you have to fight some, face some challenges, which are basically social challenges. I'm talking about realism right now, so no fantasy or fairy tales or other kind of literature. We are in realism, and so the basic message in children's books is if you are good, if you are right, if you are accepted by society, you are going to be a winner. And you should keep in mind this, because this influences very much how diversity is perceived in children's literature, but I think also in society. We have a lot of examples in society as well, but let's focus on children's literature. So next slide, please. Okay, when we talk about diversity, so mental illness and disability are all included in this scenario. How is diversity represented in this context? So when we explore children's literature, when we read books about diversity, and in particular our topic, what are we going to find? So what is in how the liberal humanist ideology influences this production, how influences the authors as well. I put here a few aspects of this problem, or this question. So diversity is represented as something inherently good. There cannot be diverse evil people in children's stories. It's not possible anymore. There's never gonna be a black evil character, a disabled evil character, a gay evil character. Never. It's impossible. This is a form of censorship which encourages inclusion, but always in the bad good binary opposition. So I hope you are following me. But this is important because inclusion should mean that we are all equal. So everyone can be bad or good. It depends on the situation, on the person, on the personality, and so on. But no, in this case, in the case of diversity, this is not possible. The second point is diversity is represented as something that should be compensated by some special skill. As we will see in the examples, it means that basically, yes, you are disabled, you are gay, you are black, but you are special in some way. So you are compensating your lack of something with something else that society values, basically. Then as something that needs approval from one's community, often through the special skill. So through the special skill, the hero acquires approval from his or her community. And then the last thing, as an issue in an issue book. What does it mean? It means that diversity must be an issue. You cannot write about a character who is gay, but is doing something else. No, his problem must be his homosexuality, or in other cases, disability or race, or so on. It's very difficult to find books where this diversity is just a trait of the character's personality. It's very, very difficult. This is because good and bad are always well defined in children's books today. So this is the general context of what I'm trying to say today. So I hope it's clear. We have an ideology. The ideology is about good and bad, binary oppositions. In children's literature is about winner-loser. So we have an hero, and this is the reason why when we represent diversity, we need to give something special, something valuable to our character, to our diverse character. So to make this clearer, I have a few examples. Next slide, please. No, the other one. Okay. Okay, I'll choose 3 novels, very famous novels. Yeah, this one. These are all bestsellers, mainstream novels that have been turned into mainstream movies. So they are very famous. These are 3 examples, in my opinion, of LHI's novels, which means novels in which is the liberal humanist ideology is foundable. It's easily foundable. So the first one is Wonder by Palacio, where there's the main character, it's a boy, is in the middle school, and he has a disability. I don't remember the exact name of the illness. It's a very rare condition, which makes his face like it was melted. So he's ugly, basically, very, very ugly. But on the other hand, is also very clever and very nice and witty. So it's funny. It's funny, and so you can see how he can compensate his ugliness with his naivety, basically. So it would have been more interesting, in my opinion, to write a book about an ugly boy who is not nice. But you cannot do that. He must be nice because he needs something to give society in exchange for his ugliness. So the question is, what happens to people who don't have anything to give in exchange to society for their disability or their diversity? That's the main question. That's the question children's literature cannot answer at the moment, and that's a problem for me. So the other one, I cannot explain very well this book because we don't have time, basically. So I'm kind of rushing, but you have an idea, and if you want, you can read them to understand more deeply what I'm saying. So the second one is a young adult novel, a crossover, actually. Me Before You by Jojo Moyes, and there is a movie as well, and this is basically a retelling of The Beauty and the Beast. So another way to represent diversity or disability in children's literature is to use the Beauty and the Beast scheme and to readapt it to a modern, for a novel modern storytelling, if you know what I mean. So we have a very beautiful young man on a wheelchair. He's very depressed. He's thinking about suicide, assisted suicide. And he meets this young girl who works for him as a nurse, basically. So they fall in love, and of course he's rich, very, very, very rich, because the beast is always rich. And that's another way to compensate the disability. So the question would be, how the story would be if it was poor? Is there a beast that, or on the other side, how the story would be if he was a she? Is there a she as a beast somewhere? It's very difficult to find it. So that's another point, the discussion. So maybe for you basically says that, yes, he is disabled, he's on a wheelchair, but he's very, very rich and he's very, very handsome. So the romance is still possible because there are compensation between disability and the social, the main characters' special skills. Okay, we can say so. So the third one is The Boy in the Dress. It's a very funny story by David Walliams. It's also a BBC movie. So the main character likes to dress like a girl. So it's a travestite, basically, a young travestite, and he has problems in his school because of this, because his peers find out that what his hobby is. But he's a champion because he's the key player of the school soccer team. So without him, it's not possible to win the game, to win I don't know how to say in English, the torneo, the championship. I don't know how to say, but anyway, there's a big competition among schools, and to win that, the school needs this boy. So at the end of the story, everyone is dressed like a girl in the field while playing soccer. So that's the solution. Society accepts the boy in a dress because he's a good soccer player. So I think this should explain my point well enough. We can change slide. If I'm out of time, please tell me, but we are almost there. These novels, on the other hand, are very good in avoiding the liberal humanist ideology trap. So they represent the one on the left, is about two conjoined twins. And it's a very, very interesting novel because it's told by the two characters' point of view, and it explores all the issues of this condition without avoiding issues like sex, sexuality, relationships, and so on. So it's very interesting if you want to really see the potential of representation of diversity and disability in children's literature. The other one on the right hand side is The One Memory of Flora Banks by Emily Baer, and this is about mental health. It's very interesting. I don't want to spoil the ending because the whole novel is about the ending, but the main point here is to question the reader all the time about what mental illness is, mental health is. So basically the author suggests that sometimes mental health can be just a way to people around us, which means community, society, to label our diversity and to control our diversity in some way. I think it suggests the current habit of parents today of labeling children from a very young age with all kinds of mental illness and mental issues just to normalize their diversities. So I'm not denying, of course, mental health, but this book in particular questions us about the boundaries between real mental health and labels that society uses to normalize us, which is very different. I hope you are following me, because this would require like 8 hours of discussion, but I'm just summarizing. Last slide, and we are there. This is my work. I wanted to give you 2 examples of my work, because I've never used the liberal humanist ideology, even when I didn't know what it was. So, so maybe that was the reason why I wondered about all these things, and how and why diversity in children's literature is always represented as something to be compensated, or something like an issue. I don't think diversity is an issue, but it could be explored as it could be the source of a new storytelling. So diversity, in my opinion, could be diversity, which means, you know, even disability, could be the source of a new storytelling. So instead of seeing inclusion as a way to insert diverse people within the dominant storytelling, I would prefer that diversity would just be a way to multiply the stories, the narratives. That's a very different thing, if you know what I mean. So anyway, sorry. The first novel on the left-hand side is Girl Detached, and now the title is Party Girl. But this book is about prostitution. So it's not about diversity or disability, but the one of the main traits of the main character is that she stammers. So all the dialogues, every time she speaks, she basically stammers. So the writing, the visual part of the novel, it's like it stammers as well. So stammering is not an issue, it's just a trait of the main character. She has other problems, but stammering is just it's just something that she lives, she experiences in her life. So the other one, Chris, is going to be out in a few months, so it's new. It's a young, they are both young adults books. In Chris, the exploration of sexual identity is not an issue, once again, it's just a possibility in life. The main character has other problems, but the exploration of sexuality and the possibility of being homosexual or bisexual or just fluid, as young people say today, it's just there, it's just in the narrative, but it's not the issue. So this is another example of how an author can use diversity as a way to enrich the narrative without making it an issue. So it's not necessary that diversity becomes an issue in children's books. This is my main point here. So I hope I've finished. I hope I was clear in some way. I hope my English was not an obstacle to your understanding. Now it's Elzaemira's turn.
So thank you, Manuela, for your presentation, which was indeed very clear and full of suggestions. So thank you again. And now I'm going to share the PowerPoint of Elzaemira, a couple of minutes, and I'm sharing it. Sorry. Okay. Can you see the PowerPoint? Yes. Okay. So, Elzaemira, I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to talk about this book, this one, and about my experience. And the book is on Down syndrome. So let's start. How the idea for this story came about. I had already written 3 stories for the Mondadori series Sassolini, a series dedicated to first readers' books, and therefore books for children aged 6 to 7. I had published very simple stories. The first one, La terribile lite del coccodrillo con il suo spazzolino, the terrible quarrel of the crocodile with his toothbrush, has animals as protagonists, a narration very close to the imaginative world of children. The second, Un presepe speciale, evokes a fantasy world even though it begins to introduce human characters alongside anthropomorphized animals. However, it remains in a surreal dimension since it is the shepherds of the nativity scene, I statuette, that come alive. With the third one, Lies, I began to shift the narrative to the analysis of children's reaction to the little problems of everyday life, such as discovering they had lice and then all the little adventures to get rid of them. In particular, this last experience of storytelling convinced me that exploring children's doubts and difficulties was a good narrative basis for gaining the maximum attention of young readers who, from the first years of primary school, want to feel like the protagonist of the story because they are beginning to take their first steps towards an increasingly marked autonomy, both in managing themselves and in building interpersonal relationships that begin to take shape in primary school. So I began to work on myself, trying to get into the age group by reworking my memories of that time, memories of both the experience I had lived through and the emotion I had felt, which now, as I try to reconstruct my childhood, resurfaced in the sea of my memories. Let's talk about my personal experience transforming it into a narrative. This photo is represented my aunt Enza. In this photo, she was 3 years old. Enza suffers from Down syndrome, and their presence in my mother's life, my mother's family, has had a great impact on the life choices of her brothers and sisters, especially because in the 1960s, there was not all the culture of a care and a support for an independent life that sustains families. But my grandmother, who was a very emancipated woman, wanted the best possible education for Enza, the education provided at the time for the young ladies of the middle class. So in addition to her schooling, Enza was taught to play the piano, embroider around the house, always under the firm guidance of my grandmother. I'm telling you this to explain why that aunt in my memory has become for me the strange, funny little girl, because when after the death of my grandmother, she came and lived at my house to me, who was a little girl. She looked like a strange mixture, partly adult because of her age, partly child for the simplicity of her approach for living always in a world of fantasy that was the world where we met to play together, building endless story and adventures. A long time ago, my high school Italian teacher, who encouraged me to become a writer, told me that the truest and most successful stories are those in which authors bring their own experience to bear. Reflecting on this advice, I finally reached the end of my search for the first story. I had a world of memories to explore, my life with Enza, to realize a new writing experience. So I now had a small core of ideas, which were then mainly my memories of life with Enza to start from. But how was I going to tell my story? And above all, what did I want to say? I certainly didn't want to tell about my personal life. I was interested in bringing that to the attention of my young readers. However, I want to convey the beauty of my relation with a person with Down syndrome, starting from the beginning, that is, how to build a bond with a person who is so different from us, and whose communication codes are sometimes completely different. And then, please watch this short film.
I'm going to
sorry, Chiara.
Enza?
The voice.
So, can you hear me?
No.
No. Chiara, I can hear you, but there was no voice with the video.
Can you hear the voice now?
No.
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 Il loro amore
And now?
in Argentina.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, now.
Okay. Okay. Let's start again.
La cosa che più mi piace dell'insegnare e racconta è la purezza del cuore dei bambini, il loro amore. In Argentina è la prima maestra con la sindrome di Down ed è una delle pochissime al mondo. Noelia Guerrera, 31 anni, quando era piccola faceva fatica ad essere accettata dai suoi compagni di classe e all'asilo, dice, qualcuno l'ha chiamata mostro. Adesso ha una sua classe, è maestra d'asilo a Cordova e con la sua determinazione è un esempio positivo per molte colleghe. I piccoli non hanno pregiudizi e i genitori dei suoi alunni sono contenti.
Right.
So this is the prevailing portrait of disability in media. You have heard it. Manuela Salvi spoke about it extensively before me. The disabled hero who overcomes prejudice and lives a normal life. Noelia's story is a good one. But I have always found that this kind of story does not reflect the experience I had firsthand when I went around my town with my aunt, who always, and I underline always, aroused the most disparate reactions with her presence, from mistrust to fear, compassion. Reaction that always upset me, since Enza was my playmate, full stop, and deserved to be treated like everyone else. And that was what I was going to talk about in my new story. Let's talk about realization of the story. When I started to write my story, I began to wonder what kind of stylish choice I should make. Should I use the third person and observe the events from the outside, or choose the first person and be immersed in the story? I must say that I didn't think much about it. If I had to start from my own experience, I had to feel involved to the maximum, so the first person was ideal. But then I asked myself, who is telling the story in the first person? The little girl with Down syndrome? It was unrealistic. Half Enza can read and write, she's not able, due to the severe form of her genetic mutation, to sustain a long narration. So I prefer to tell the story through the perspective of Marco, the boy who lives next door to Francesca, the little girl with Down syndrome. Marco's point of view offered me the possibility to describing all possible reaction to an experience with a person with Down syndrome, and moreover, it offered me the chance to better identify with the readers who could thus recall their experience with Down syndrome people and compare them with that of the protagonist. Please, next slide. I saw her standing still on the landing, and she hit me. Man, what a fun little girl. Thick glasses covering a pair of almond-shaped eyes and black hair striped as spaghetti. Francesca is beautiful. Francesca is out of tune. Francesca is carefree, always immersed in her fantasy world. But Francesca is very sociable, open to art and curious. Marco hates her quirks. He doesn't understand them, but Francesca is a good playmate, and this is where their friendship starts. Next slide, please. I went down to the courtyard to play. It's totally deserted. They are all watching cartoons on TV, but I have got my ball and 2 trees to make the goal, and stamp an amazing goal. Too bad, with a goalkeeper it would have been more fun. From behind the trees comes Francesca. I put her between the goalposts and start the game again. She's not worth anything as a goalkeeper, but this way there's more satisfaction in scoring goals. The friendship I'm talking about is made up of little things like sharing a PlayStation or a car track, but each time it is an opportunity for Marco to discover Francesca's world, like when she's punished for pulling a schoolmate's hair. Yes, it happens between children, and she is forced to copy down sentences for 10 pages in nice handwriting. The episode shows Marco how difficult is writing for Francesca, and this makes him realize how much effort she puts into doing what others simply do. But his comment is childish and therefore a bit poisonous. Please, the next. Every time she writes a letter, she has to reread it, and it takes a lot of time. And it's a good thing that the sentences to be copied is made up of only 4 words. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to finish it even at Christmas. The problem starts when Marco and Francesca and their friendship plan end up under the lens of other children. In this case, my experience with my aunt has been very helpful in describing tension created when others do not understand or judge. Fear, prejudice, closure turn into accusation, teasing, isolation. Please, next. And other kids chanting, Marco loves a dance girl. He has a dance girl for a girlfriend. She's not my girlfriend, I shout with all my might. At this point, Marco does not have the strength to resist the pressure of the group of his friends and puts Francesca aside. I want to tell it this way because it had to be a true story, because suffering from Down syndrome is obviously not an easy life, but also living with the Down syndrome people, even if it is wonderful and enriching, involves many problems, especially social ones. And this is what I tough young readers needed to understand so that they could identify with it and, if not develop, at least to predispose to a culture of inclusion, of diversity. Marco follows these paths in the book. First, he hits the bottom, ending up laughing with others at Francesca, sharing, albeit reluctantly, the behavior of those who make fun of her. Then, caught up in a sense of shame, and I assure you it is an unbearable feeling. He rebels and makes his mistake clear to the group. But this kind of conclusion was not enough for me. Putting everything back in its place was not a sufficient condition for me. Please, next. I ran off to call Francesca, but I can't find her. In the meantime, Francesca has gone to live in another town, and Marco is left with a bitter taste in his mouth. Unfortunately, that's how it happens. This was the drafting of my idea. During the production phase, the publisher's comments focused on the development of the story because, as I mentioned earlier, disability was told in an absolutely normal way. No superhero, no success, no incredible talent to compensate for diversity. Finally, the publisher decided to have the text read by an association of parents of children with Down syndrome. 3 weeks of careful reading for a positive response. But what made me proud was that association praised the verisimilitude of the story and its ability to capture the dynamics between children. In this case, I was also like, because the publisher wanted to invest in the story, but that is not to be taken for granted. In my subsequent experience, I realized that every story that involves a minimum of difficulty ends up being discarded because publishers do not want problems, do not have time, and do not invest in what they publish. It sounds like a nonsense, but it's so. Fruition of the books is now similar to any other product, and venturing into formulas vaguely distant from prevailing taste becomes, for the publishers, a bad deal. So better to discard and look for something else. But The book has been very well received over the years and several editions have been published. It was especially emphasized in schools. Teachers have used it a lot to address the issue of diversity in general. I was often involved in this project with my own readings in class, and I noticed that what stuck with young readers was Marcus' ambiguous attitude and all his doubts. That's when I realized that I had hit the target, pushing those who approach the story to question themselves and their fears. And this was the best gift that La Buffa Bambina could have given me. Thank you so much, and I apologize for my English.
Thank you, Elzaemira, for your beautiful introduction, for your beautiful presentation. So we thank you, Elzaemira, and thank you, Manuela, for this interweaving of theoretical reflection with personal experience. You have raised so many issues. And as you know, we have a little less time than usual since we have to end the recording at 8:15. But I have already received a question. The question is for Manuela. And the question is, how can diversity be included in these binary oppositions?
Sorry, I'm reading the question. Can you say again? Because there is another question in the chat. So
I've received this question by email.
Oh, okay. So can you say it again? Because I was.
Okay. How can diversity be included in these binary oppositions?
No, it cannot be. I think the only way to be included in this kind of environment is to be normalized. And I wouldn't want that. I don't want that for myself. I don't think I'm normal. I don't think that normality exists. So we should oppose this idea that there can be a normality that includes everyone. It's not that the point. I think that diversity should bring more narratives, more options, more storytellings, more stories, more books, more experiences. So we should be able to see the world through the eyes of the diverse people. I say diverse because there's not another term to use, but I think you can understand what I'm saying. So I'm not sure that inclusion is the key, because inclusion at the moment requires normalization. You need to be normalized in order to be included. So a lot of labels, a lot of new labels, so that everyone can feel included. I don't know where, and I don't know why. So I think all this implies that there is a desirable reality where everyone wants to be. So that's the point. Is there a desirable normality, a desirable reality, a dominant reality? So we need to be normalized in order to be part of it. I disagree. I disagree. Maybe because I'm from the 90s, and in the 90s, for example, the gay community was bringing a lot of different narratives. There was a very exciting new storytelling around, and now everything is just normalized. The gay community is very normalized, a lot of labels, a lot of boundaries, a lot of fences, many fences, because a label means a new fence, a new boundary between people. I really disagree with that. So yeah, I don't know if I answered to your question.
Yeah, I think so, because she texted me and she said it is precisely what I wanted to hear.
Okay. Of course, mine is just a point of view. So it's my opinion based on my studies and on my experience as an author, but always an opinion.
Okay. And then there is another question for you, and then other messages. I totally agree with you. Thank you. And Giada was the one who asked the question. And thank you both very much for your interesting presentations. So thank you, Elzaemira, and thank you, Manuela. And the other question is, thank you both for your presentations. I have a comment concerning Manuela's speech, which I found quite insightful. Do you know the TV series Sex Education on Netflix? There is a disabled character, Isaac, who is both poor and rather evil, but I guess that was an exception in both literary and cinematic spheres, which tend to stress how beautiful and perfect the life before disability was for the characters taken into account, and therefore strengthening ableist discourses, which still characterize our Western society by looking at disability as something that has to be compensated for.
Yeah, I saw, of course, Sex Education. I'm a big fan of it. And I think that its main strength, it's just playing with stereotypes. It plays with stereotypes all the time. And I think that Isaac is a very interesting character because he's realistic. He's disabled. I wouldn't say he's evil. He's just a person. He's realistic and he's selfish. Sometimes he behaves just to fulfill his desires and his dreams as anyone else. So he's not a saint. Sometimes he's good. He has something good, but basically he's a person. So he needs to be selfish here and then. So yeah, I totally agree. Sex Education is a very rare and wonderful example of what we are saying, but it's not a book. It would never be a book, never. So if an author wrote something like Sex Education, it would be very difficult to be published. So, and this is another topic, so for another conference.
Okay, I've received a question for Elzaemira through private email. Thank you very much for your presentation. You have in a way mentioned the idea of success in the marketplace. Have you considered marketplace in the moment in which you started writing your story, or were you driven by your desire to tell about your personal experience? I translate the question for Elzaemira. Grazie per la presentazione. In un certo modo hai evidenziato, posto in luce l'importanza del successo sul mercato editoriale. Hai preso in considerazione il mercato editoriale nel momento in cui hai cominciato a scrivere la storia, o sei stata spinta dal tuo desiderio di trasmettere l'esperienza personale?
No, in realtà l'ho scritta senza avere l'editore, l'ho scritta perché di getto sentivo il bisogno di scrivere questa storia. Però effettivamente si può cadere in questo tranello di scrivere per farsi pubblicare, e questo porta al condizionamento di cui ha molto ben parlato Manuela. Si finisce per ricalcare degli stereotipi. Io mi sono trovata anche in questa situazione, e dopo un primo esperimento però ho lasciato perdere, perché faccio un altro lavoro e quindi non devo vivere di scrittura. Però effettivamente chi vive di scrittura subisce un po' la dittatura dell'editore, e quindi rischia di pubblicare cose che non escono da questo circuito di normalizzazione di cui parlava Manuela.
Okay, so no, I wrote the story without having a publisher, but it can happen to write in order to be published. And the result is what Manuela has very well described, that is to say, you can use stereotypes and narration that, you know, are well accepted by the public. I'm lucky because this is not my first work, that is to say, it's not the work that gives me the food and the money for living. And so I'm in a way more so freer to write, but yes, it can happen and it is tricky. Okay. Are there another question for Elzaemira? Then, do personal experiences influence the characterization of stereotypes? Allora, le esperienze personali possono avere influenza sulla resa di stereotipi?
Io penso che quando uno scrittore scriva non può fare a meno delle sue esperienze, del suo modo di vedere le cose. Non so se siano stereotipi, sono più che altro le sue convinzioni, che possono anche avere degli stereotipi, perché a volte anche noi, pur scrivendo, pur cercando di analizzare la realtà, a volte semplifichiamo.
Okay, so I think that when a writer writes, he cannot but write about his or her own experiences, his or her own particular lens of looking at a reality. Okay, so I think that together with Sidia, we can thank you all for your presence. We can really thank Elzaemira and Manuela for your wonderful suggestions, and see you on the 26th of January. And meanwhile, in the meanwhile, I wish you happy Christmas and a happy New Year.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.